Welcome back to another edition of Talk Nerdy to Me. Do you like comics?
I love comics.
Do you love comic book conventions?
I love comic book conventions.
Do you love dealing with celebrities at comic book conventions?
Plead the fifth.
Now, you know what? This has been a complete joy. Jack Lutz here with Troy Stegner. This right here, it's Kevin Eastman. You know him, co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Sir, how are you? Thank you for doing this.
Awesome to be here.
Thank you
so
for
much,
doing
guys.
this. So, as this interview comes out, this is the middle of, this is a Sunday edition of El Paso Comic Con, and how do you think it's going so far?
Good. Actually, we've had we just finished an awesome panel, and I just profusely thank the fans, not only for making us feel so loved, so welcome. You know, Paso is the first time here, and I always have to thank them for giving me the best job on the entire planet, because without all those people sitting in that audience and that line and coming to see us, see me, and it's fantastic. We had a great day. Thank you.
Very welcome. I wanted to take this back to the beginning, the very, very beginning. Okay, how did your parents meet? No, not that far, not that far back. Let's say
There was a gleam in my daddy's eye.
It was a dark and rainy night.
let's say you're 8, 9 years old. You're delivering newspapers. You're a kid. You come across the works of Jack Kirby.
That's correct.
And what did that mean to you? I really love to talk about with other comic people when they came across comics for the first time and when their love right there, it happened, boom, it hits them. What did that mean to you when you first started, when you first had that love? You know what, I love books and I love Kirby.
Well, it was overwhelming. It was awesome. It was, I'd got some comic books. I had a few of this. I loved them. I loved anything to do with artwork. I was doodling and drawing all the time. And as you said, I actually had a paper route in this tiny little town of Gorham, Maine. And I would make about $3 a month. That was my cut.
Oh my gosh.
But fortunately, comic books were only 20 cents a piece.
Yeah.
You buy a few, yeah.
You just
So
aged yourself.
Oh man, I did. Very much so. And in those days too, they didn't have cool comic book stores, or none in my area. I was still buying them off the spinner
The
rack.
spinner rack in the drugstore. Yeah.
So it's like for $3.25, I could literally get 10 comic books, and a Yoo-Hoo and a Twinkie, and then have a little left over. But that's where I discovered Jack Kirby's Commandy. And what's funny is the first movie I ever saw in a theater, my sister took us to. We were probably too young to see it at the time too. My sister took us to see Planet of the Apes, and it was like, oh,
Damn
so
you, yeah.
damn you, Jack.
Dirty
apes.
You damn dirty apes. Between the three of us, we'll get that one.
I know, yeah. God, yeah.
But I just love Planet of the Apes, and Kirby's Commandy was, the last boy on Earth, which growing up in this tiny little town of Maine, I thought I was the last boy on Earth sometimes, and based on the whole Planet of the Apes concept, humans are slaves, and we took it one step further where there was apes and lions and tigers and all animals ruled the earth, and it was just, that was it. From that Comic Con, I was like, it's still to this day is my favorite comic of all time, but that was, I remember like, telling my parents, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to draw comic books for a living. I want to be Jack Kirby.
How were they? Were they supportive of that at first?
Well, it's like, I think that, the initial response was like, oh, we're going to have one of those kids that's never going to move out of the basement.
Here's your helmet.
Exactly. You can't ride the bike anymore.
Yeah.
No, but my talent is inherited in that, a lot of especially my dad's side, my grandmother used to do watercolors all the time. My dad used to doodle. All his brothers used to doodle. And so, when I said I want to be an artist, they liked the idea that I wanted to be an artist. They weren't necessarily sure the comic books were the best route, because they honestly didn't think I could make a living doing that. So,
do you want to redo this part?
Yeah.
I'll leave it in.
Yeah, meanwhile, there's a crime going on.
It's Burt Ward.
Yeah. A murder at Comic Con. There's your next comic.
Casey Jones, where are you? We need you.
So that was it. But they were supportive in their own way, and I think as time went on, they pretty much knew I was doing it come hell or high water.
This is what you wanted to do. Fast forward now to this little old magazine called Scat that you wanted to be a part of. You had your own portfolio and you took your stuff to them, and what happened there?
Well, it was really fun because I just moved into, I grew up in Maine, and in Maine you work for the tourists for the, Memorial Day to Labor Day. You try to save up your money to live through the winter. I ended up meeting a friend, and I moved down to Northampton area of Massachusetts. And riding, like you said, I was riding the bus one day. I see this copy of Scat, and it was locally printed. Featured a lot of artwork and comics, cartoons by local artists. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go get a job. So I went over there, and they'd already kind of moved on to doing advertising for the local businesses that help support their magazine. But they said, you can draw the same kind of weird superhero kind of stuff as this guy Peter Laird, who's an artist who lives up the street here. You should meet him. And they gave me his address. I wrote him a letter, like you did back in those days.
Yeah.
He wrote me a letter.
And they
back.
gave you the address. Like, this guy, we can trust him.
Yeah.
Seems like a nice
pen and
guy.
paper?
Yeah,
How does that
pen and
work?
paper. Yeah.
No email? No, nothing to get back?
No, we didn't Instagram each other.
You had to lick
No.
a stamp? And then...
You know, it was just one step up from smoke signals.
So you wrote him, and
Yeah,
how long did it take for him to write back and then to have that connection?
It was pretty quick because it was like I said, I just moved to the area. I love comics, Jack Kirby, and blah blah blah, and I'd like to meet some local artists to hang out with. And he wrote me back. It was within a week or so, and he said, "Yeah, why don't you come by the studio sometime?" And so I did. I went by and his studio was probably about the size of maybe one of the restrooms here. Tiny little studio apartment, and he had a Jack Kirby original on the wall, which he later gave me, which is still one of my prized possessions. But that was it. The bond over Kirby was immediate, and from the very first meeting, it was like, well, let's work together. Let's draw. I'll pencil something, you pencil something, one page each, and we'll swap them the next time we meet. We can ink each other's work. And it was just a fast venture up and a fast bond. That's. So it's a long time ago.
So you guys are working together, and you're sharing a studio, and let's hear about the origins of the Mirage Studios and how really Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came to be. It started as a joke with you two.
Pretty much, yeah. It was, as I mentioned earlier, growing up in Maine, you worked for the tourist season. So after meeting Pete, we got to become friends. I moved back to Maine because it was heading towards lobster cooking time. So that was my summer job. So while I was cooking lobsters that summer, Pete met a woman who now is his wife Janine, and she was a teacher, and she got a job up in New Hampshire, which was 20 minutes from where I was working in Maine. So I finished cooking lobsters that summer. Pete said, "Hey, let's form a studio. We'll get together and we can team up on some of our strengths and ideas and try to sell our ideas." And so I moved in. They rented me a room in the place they were renting, and it was Mirage Studios because it wasn't Mirage, it was our living room. And so
deceptive.
Aptly named.
Aptly named, appropriate, yeah. And it was late one night, I was thinking to myself, if Bruce Lee was an animal, what would be the silliest animal Bruce Lee would be? Fast-moving martial artist, slow-moving turtle. So I did the sketch and put it on Pete's drawing table. I said, this is going to be the next big thing, ha ha ha. And he laughed, and he did a sketch to one up what I did, and I of course had to top his sketch. So instead of one turtle, I did 4 in pencil, each with different weapons, and kind of this comic booky Ninja Turtle logo on it. And when Pete inked it in, he added Teenage Mutant to the title, and we kind of looked at it and said, this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And we didn't have any distracting painting work going on too, so we said, let's stop creating ideas to send to other people. We love this one. Let's keep it for ourselves. Let's self-publish it, and let's do a comic book story we're writing just for ourselves. So that was in 1983. We started in 1984, May of 1984. We self-published the first issue.
A lot of huge risks when you self-publish something. I'm sure a lot of things had to have been put up, a house, a car, or something.
Dude, we were back in those because we did it inspired by Dave Sim, who started Cerebus, was a black and white comic book with a 2-color cover. And so we found a local printer in Dover, New Hampshire, and I think between the $500 income tax return I had, cleaned out $200 out of Pete's bank account, and I borrowed $1,000 from an uncle.
Turned in pop bottles.
Collected cans. Yeah, we begged, borrowed, and stole. But I had an uncle, Quentin, that actually sold art supplies, and he was very supportive of this. And so we put together a business plan. We said, this is what we're going to do. This is how much it's going to cost. You loan us this. This is how much you make back with interest. And so we had enough to print 3,000 copies, and I think it was like $1,600, $1,700, but $1983, $1984, that's a lot.
Adjusted for inflation, $5 million.
If you have one of those copies now, it's worth a lot more than that.
It is.
Whole print run.
I know, it's not crazy. It's like one copy today. Is And I remember like early on, because it's, to our surprise, a lot of people's surprise, it sold out very quickly to get it at the comic stores and stuff like that. And I remember within the first year we got a letter from a fan in New York saying, I'm a huge fan of the Turtles. I just paid $25 for a copy of number 1, and this is in 1984. And we're like,
$25.
and we went like, what? It's a $1.50 comic book.
Wow.
That it was, his name was Larry Klein. When we became we would see him every year in San Diego for years, but it's like that was mind blowing. So we call him kind of the first original fan.
The
so
OG.
to
The one that, it's snowballed. Speaking of the snowball effect here, so issue 1 comes out, but it's really started to hit you. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, when issue 2 came out.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was. I always like to point out issue 2 because I got done cooking after the first issue came out. Went back to cook lobsters for the summer, and then that fall, Pete called and he said, "Well, some of those comic stores and the distributors we sold the first issue to keep calling and saying, well, when are you going to do a second issue?" And both Pete and I were like, "Well, we never thought the first issue would sell."
Surprise!
Surprise! So we never thought of doing a second issue. So we started working on it. What's that?
Now we gotta think of a story.
We don't. Now we
killed the main guy. We killed the villain. It's
Wait, now there's
spoiler shredder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the original, and Shredder kind of kicks it.
And that's and I mean again, that's why the first issue was so complete in that we never thought there'd be another one. It was like
It was just gonna be his own
Yep.
one shot.
Yeah.
I-
The origin, the backstory, and the death of the main.
How many reprints did they do of that?
Well, we did another printing of issue 1, which was 6,000 copies. Then we didn't do another printing of issue 1 until after issue 2 came out, maybe around issue 3.
I was flipping through the channels the other day, and I watched Storage Wars,
Oh yeah.
and somebody found it was the 3rd or 4th printing
Yeah, third printing. Yeah.
of number 1.
it's still
It's still a few $100
Yeah,
for
yeah.
3rd and 4th printing.
you get it graded. Signed, yeah.
And they brought it to some guy, a Jew, to get it.
Wait a minute.
I think they were trying to get it validated.
So yeah, what was awesome about Storage Wars was that we were fans of it, anyway. And then and Renee and Casey from the show moved in down the street, and they actually came over one day and said, "Hey, we just bought this locker, and it had a bunch of original Turtle comic books and toys in it, which you give us an estimated value on it." And we just opened up with IDW. We opened up the San Diego Comic Art Gallery, which it's the new home, and I think one of the only in the country right now for exclusively showcasing comic book art. My studio is there and everything. So yeah, they came down, they filmed it, and I gave them the estimate that I could, and signed them.
You get to be
To
on
increase
one
the
of your
value.
shows.
And then they got to be on.
Yeah, I think he actually signed it another couple times to increase it.
Yeah, I signed it 6 times.
Yeah, that increased about $100.
I want us to get to the toy factor here in just a second. And so, again, this is all snowballing. A few years later now, the studios, Hollywood, comes knocking on your door, and they say, "You know what? I think we can make this into a cartoon." And what your initial reaction? I remember my exposure was the cartoon. That was my exposure. And then my second exposure, as I was your perfect demo, by the way. And then it was kindergarten, 80s. I know I look old, but and the second exposure was reading Ninja Turtles 1. I went, "Oh my God, this is violent. How did they make this into a cartoon?" That had to have been your first idea too. I don't know if you guys can do that, right?
Yeah, it was like what was funny is like when we started when issue 2 came out, and I always call issue 2, which is when the dream came true, is where we then made enough money that if we did, Pete and I figured out if we did 6 a year, we could make enough money to pay our rent, eat all the macaroni and cheese we want, and become Jack Kirby, basically drawing comic books for a living. And although we kept the stories, edgy, written for us, they were still, not intended for a kid's audience. And so when, Hollywood came knocking, as sales continued going up, I think by issue 7 or 8, we were already up around almost 100,000 copies an issue, and we said, no, this is kind of intended for an older audience. I don't see how you can rework this into a kids property, if you will. But we thought it was intriguing. We thought it was an interesting idea because we were lucky enough that Pete and I owned and controlled whatever was to be done or not be done with the Turtles. We both agreed to say, well, let's see if we can soften some of the edges. See if we knew specifically we were writing for a 5, 6, 7-year-old child audience. So we softened up some of the origin bits. We changed things like giving the Turtles different colored bandanas so you could tell them apart easier in animation, because black and white comic books then you could only tell them apart from the weapons. And so we softened up some of those bits and pieces, and kind of rolled the dice and with Playmates Toys and Lore Comic Wolf was the animation studio, and to our surprise, I think everyone's surprised, it really went out there.
It's a cliche question, but TV Guide winter issue, you see that the Turtles are going to be on there, or walking into KB Toys, you and Peter, checking out the initial toy run, and hearing a mother say, "I'm not gonna buy you those stupid Ninja Turtles," witnessing the whole thing.
Well, but,
it had to have been surreal.
Oh, more than. I think it was, it's one of those things that, going back to the attitude of our parents, if you will, at least mine specifically, was that, you want to be this cartoonist, you're never going to make a living doing it, you have to grow up and get, go to college and learn a real trade so you can, take care of your family, and then, and it was almost like when it came out on TV Guide, it was like, because, we tell our parents, hey, we're flying out to California to work on this cartoon show, and they're like, that's good, nice.
He'll be back next week.
and then when it comes on TV Guide, because that was it, It's like, look, it's a TV Guide, we're doing it.
And TV Guide is a publication they used to put out.
Yes.
Had TV shows listener before the internet.
It was right next to the Reader's Digest.
Yes. And other things you read.
Walgreens.
But yeah, that was surreal, and then the fact that it came out and the ratings were high enough that they immediately, that January, because it came out like Christmas break, 87 between New Year's 88, and so they started working on the next 8 episodes. So then they would run it as a 13 episode season that fall, which at that point then Playmates agreed to go ahead and make the toys. They said, okay, the ratings are good enough, now let's make the toys and see if those work. And so step 2, that was like, again, the validation factor, not only for us, but for, the world at large, our folks and everybody else was going to the KB, and both were incredibly surreal moments. And it just continued to, I remember that year, specifically in that, because of those awesome moments, we went from spending, the year before spending 90% of our time being artists, writing and drawing turtle comic books, to 90% of our time, 10% of the time doing business, to 90% of our time handling the turtle business, and 10% of our time doing the physical drawing the way we used to, because we were now running a business. And that was even more surreal, because the next shows came out, and those kept getting, the ratings kept going up, the toys kept selling like crazy, and we started the movie.
And everybody wants new stories.
Yeah.
Everybody wants new stories.
So now step 3, the movie comes along. And there had to have been an initial fear because, okay, our work is being translated into, okay, a cartoon, cool.
Live.
Toys, cool. Live action. You had to be a little worried. Maybe it's going to not really translate well into film. There had to have been a little bit of worry.
A little bit of worry. In fact, I haven't told the story in a while, but it's funny. One of the first proposals we got was from Billy Crystal, Sam Kennison, Bobcat Goldthwait, and I believe Gallagher. We're working with New Horizon or New Conquer. They sent in a proposal about doing a turtle movie, and they were going to wear just turtle shells and paint their faces green. And
Sam Kinison.
So glad you did.
Raphael. I just would have yelled at you the whole time.
So it was one, again, we had the luxury of, because controlling our characters.
You controlled your destiny.
Good decision.
So we
said,
said, no, we're not going to do that. But the scariness of actually bringing it to life on the big screen in live action format was really frightening. And again, comics are easy, and that they're hand drawn. Animation is easy in the same sense that they're hand drawn. You can, whatever you can draw, you can create. Toys, again, speaks for itself. But thankfully we had the awesome Jim Henson come to our rescue, and he's the one that really made that turtle movie work. And he brought those characters to life.
Those suits.
With the suits, that were, they'd find the right actor. They'd literally do a body cast of that actor, so that even those suits were made to, as that character moved and flexed, the muscles would actually move with it. But no, he even a lot of the technology that they came up with just to bring them to life was specifically invented and created for the turtle movie, which then went on to be used in everything from dinosaurs to so many other Henson projects. But no, Jim Henson and the incredible Steve Barron, who was the director of the movie, they made that movie work on every level. It's still, here we are 32 years later, and all the different comics and variations on the comics, the animation and the variations thereof, and the movies, that first Turtle movie to me is always still my favorite.
Near and dear. I think I saw that movie about 4 times as a kid. This was a time when I would tell my mom and dad, my best friend and I, we're going to go to the movies and we're going to go see Ninja Turtles. Mind you, I'm 9. And my parents would, sure, have a good time. This is the 1989, 1990. There was no question. We didn't question that.
Yep.
Now you got to go everywhere with a helmet on and pads and whatnot. But at least a dozen times.
We have,
seen that.
with our son, we have the airbags. He's got his own personal airbags, so he falls over. No, it's but it is. It's a completely different time. I mean,
What were you more angry with? Your cameo in the first one being just a little blob, or your cameo being cut in the Michael Bay film?
well, it's a.
Why? I mean, why would they do that to
You
you?
didn't even ask him about the Michael Bay film yet.
It's
With the
it's
gonna get to
CGI
that.
turtles.
well, it's both. It's always a funny thing because like I'm one of those people that like, I used to hate hearing my own voice on a answer machine. You know what I mean? It's like because we all think like. Remember the Pee-wee's Big Adventure movie where, we sound like Pee-wee Herman, but we actually think we sound like, Clint Eastwood or something.
Sure.
So when, they're doing this cameo thing, the funniest part was like, they put me in, I was Ernie the Garbage Man, had a name on there. They made me put makeup on. It was all the stuff. So I'm expecting like, the way that the director described the scene to me, it's like I'm expecting this close-up, of like, some kind of thing. But that's what it was. It was like, 2 turtles fighting, changing dialogue, then right behind them Leonardo was like taking out like 10 foot soldiers, and this was a setup for the garbage truck at the end, which kills, the shredder falls into. And down the street this garbage man walks out holding 2 bags of garbage, and the garbage truck comes behind him, looks down the street, sees what's going on, and panics and drops both of the garbage bags and runs back down the alley. And so I'm thinking like, again, close up and, to hear, and all this stuff. So I'm telling everybody.
Easter egg.
I'm in the movie. And then it comes out and it's like, you watch the scene and it's like, like you said, you see this black blob go, and that was it. Could have been.
Were you in there later? Was that
Sure.
Oh, that's right. We're going to sign again for our Paso fans.
So, getting to the new films real quick here, I don't want to say, and this is sacrilegious to say this, because the popularity never really dwindled, but in the 90s, 2000s, it plateaued. It didn't go anywhere. Now, it's hot again. It's hot. The Turtles are in. The Turtles are so popular, and it had to have also re-energized you, especially dealing with IDW and going into these new films. Part 2 coming up soon.
Crazy. No, it's funny because when we first started out, our agent at the time that was helping us and navigating us through all these different universes of toys and animation and movies, he said typically a property like this, especially a boys action figure property, what you're going to see is you have the introduction year, and if it works, you'll get a second year, a second series of cartoons, maybe some new toys. He said usually by the 3rd year, it's over, you're in the discount bins, and that's it. And so he said, save your money, plan wisely, and we're like, yeah, we're going to do that anyway, thank you. And then, as each year kept kind of going on, it just kept going and going. And so even by like 1997, we were still doing the live action show, and it was, the peak being 90, 91, 92, it was, even by 97, it was not in a valley yet, but it had sort of plateaued, but there was still toys being made and shows being enjoyed. But then it drifted off, and then if you think like, it's amazing that it worked as a comic book, amazing that it worked as a cartoon show. We hit that generation, and it's over. What a fantastic ride! I can dine out on it forever. And now it starts making this comeback, and it becomes generational.
It's the word to use, yeah.
Yeah, which is like, boom, it's even more mind-blowing because, in my opinion, you can't tell a child what's cool and what's not cool. The fact that the first group of young people found it the first time around and now grown up and have kids of their own, and their kids, are discovering it on their own, I think, there's something in the Turtles that resonate. To me, that's, the biggest compliment I could ever imagine. And now with the cartoon show and the movies, and my favorite, I love them all, but, I work hands-on with IDW on the comic series, and it's just, I can't believe I still get to get up and draw Turtles and tell these great stories and these great adventures with, Tom Waltz and Bobby and the people we work with there. That just a great group of creative people, and we have too much fun.
And we'll end it here with going back to your roots. We'll end it here, going back to your roots, the comics, IDW. It's
beyond great.
Yeah.
No, it really is. It's like, you know, it's humbling. It's a blessing. It's like you feel unworthy. You feel like, you know, you're the luckiest guy on the planet, and I do every day. I get to get up and live out the dream. Basically that dream as I had as a kid of being Jack Kirby and writing and drawing and telling my own comic stories. I'm living the dream, and that's all you fans' fault. So thank you.
Well, I gotta say, I must say, and I think I speak for Troy here. Thank you very much for the endless joy to my childhood, my friends' childhoods, and just meeting you and talking to you is scratching off the bucket list.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for bringing us down to El Paso. We've got
My hand. I don't know if you're ready for this. They're clammy. They're clammy. We'll do this.
Mine are spammy. His is clammy.
Are you ready to?
Clammy.
You ready to go back and meet your fans?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jack Lutz.
Troy Singer.
Kevin Eastman.
Stay sturdy.
Good night.
And sleep tight. I kind of like that though. Stay sturdy.
Have you seen the new shirts?
Yeah.
I haven't
Stay
seen
sturdy.
I have not seen those.
I have to give you one.
Yes.
Because it's a new.
Get nerdy with me. Tell me what